Hey there, so this lesson is titled Overcome Emotional Eating. So what we'll cover today, what is emotional eating, the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger, and we've got a worksheet, Are You an Emotional Eater? The 5-step formula to beat emotional eating, and responding to setbacks. So what is emotional eating? Well, emotional eating is overeating in response to or to fill certain emotions, rather than eating for hunger. It's one of the reasons why it's difficult to maintain weight loss, and that's because we have always used food to soothe or reward emotions. Think about it. When we were babies and we cried, our mothers gave us milk. When we went to the doctors, we got a lollipop. When we had a birthday, we celebrated with cake. At Christmas, we get chocolate and other treats, and so on. Food has been linked with emotions, good and sad, happy and sad, for a very, very long time. It can serve a purpose in many situations, but for some situations, like weight loss, it can be detrimental, and there are more suitable ways to fill an emotional hole. So what's the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger? Let's have a look at this table here. So emotional hunger, it appears suddenly. It intensifies and then can completely go away. We could often label them as cravings or an impulse. It's often just for specific foods only. You know what I'm thinking about, like chocolate or ice cream, etc. It's associated with feelings of guilt or shame or failure. Now, physical hunger, it builds gradually. It worsens over time and it can go away, but not quite. It kind of lingers. Real hunger. You might get a grumbly stomach, or irritable or moody, hangry. Any food will do. So like I mentioned in some other lessons, my apple test, think of a fruit that you like. If you saw that fruit or you could have access to it, would you eat it? Like, would you be like, oh yeah, I want that apple right now? That's when you're physically hungry. If it's an emotional hunger, you look at that apple and you don't want that. You want something, but you don't want that. Then you're not really physically hungry. And with physical hunger, you, instead of feeling guilt or shame afterwards, you feel satisfied and content. So do you eat or drink your emotions? Maybe you've had a bad day and you get the wine out. Or you're lonely or something happened to you in the day and you eat an entire block of chocolate. Now have a look at the worksheet for this lesson, and I want you to reflect on your own emotional eating experiences and write them down to help you understand your current reactions to emotions and food. And pretty much everyone does eat emotionally to some degree. For some, it gets to an extent where it can become problematic and it works against our health and our weight loss goals until we address it. So now that you've identified, you've gone through the worksheet. So yeah, pause the video, have a look at the worksheet. Go through it. I know it can be challenging, but the only way to overcome this problem is to address it head on. And to really apply yourself for just 15, 20, 30 minutes to get on top of it. That's the hardest part. So now that you've identified the experiences that trigger your emotional eating, do you have specific foods that you emotionally eat on, that you choose? You might know them as, bad foods, fattening foods, forbidden foods, cheat foods, food cravings. Some examples are, wine or beer, chocolate, chips, crisps, candy, bread, I don't know. write these down on your worksheet as well. Okay, so now that you've done that and you've identified your trigger experiences and your trigger foods, I would recommend that you don't keep those trigger foods in your home. It's simple as that, because if they're available to you, you have to have that conflict in your head. It crosses your mind. Oh, I know that's there, and I want to eat it right now because it's there. If it's not there, it won't even cross your mind. Now, the argument people have is, oh, but my kids want to eat that. Well, too bad for your kids. They'll survive. Ultimately, you make the decisions, the food decisions in the household. So, if it's not good for you, is it good for your kids really? And if that's still not an option for whatever reason, put these foods somewhere where they're difficult for you to reach, or they're just not somewhere that you see. So many people have their trigger foods. They do this exercise. They figure out their trigger experiences. They figure out their trigger foods, and then they keep they have those trigger foods all around the house in such easily accessible places where it crosses their mind like 50 times a day. Like just on the coffee table there, chocolate, or like on the dining table, or in the pantry at eye level, in the pantry where they keep all their other food that you use for cooking and things, where you see like where your other healthier foods are, those trigger foods are there next to them as well. In the fridge at eye level, next to your vegetables and fruits and all that. So obviously you're going into your fridge all the time. You're going to see them all the time. Put your vegetables and fruits on the shelf in the fridge at eye level, and put the trigger foods in the vegetable crisper. The drawers in the fridge. Like do a swap there so they're out of sight, or put them up in a high level or at the back of the cupboard down the bottom where they're hard to find. Then your kids can go and get them, but for you, you're less likely to think about them. They're less likely to come across your path in the day because you don't see them. Make your environment conducive to your goals. If you don't do that, it is like 1,000 times harder, near impossible. So make sure you're doing these things. Now, in saying that, you shouldn't have your trigger foods in the house, but it's not that trigger foods are forbidden, right? Of course, working with me, nothing's forbidden, okay? Allow yourself to eat the trigger foods out in public. Like when you're eating out with friends or family, when it's an occasion. One of the rules I like is no beer or wine, for example, by yourself. The same could be for chocolate. You don't eat those things by yourself. They're fun foods. They should be enjoyed. They do add value to our lives in different ways. But have them in a social setting. That's where they're healthy. That's where they're good for you, good for your mental health. When you're eating them by yourself at home, that's when these feelings of guilt or shame can be associated. So we can easily avoid that, and we can disarm those feelings by enjoying those foods in public, because you're allowing yourself to do that. And eating with friends or family, they're not forbidden foods. The mere act of allowing yourself to eat these foods will also reduce your craving for these foods. That's just how the human mind works. It's ridiculous. It wants what it can't have. But you are allowing yourself to have that. But in public, get a little bit uncomfortable. Eat these things in public with people. That will help disarm the power it has over you when you're by yourself. And so the other thing you need to do is to find alternatives to deal with your emotions. Because it does come back to, you're eating these foods largely to fill an emotional need or hole. So are there other, you can avoid the trigger foods, yeah, but maybe you still need to address that emotion. It cannot be ignored. Okay, so now that we've explored why you emotionally eat, right? We did that first. And then what your trigger foods are. we need to think of non-food alternatives to fill that emotional need, okay? So in your worksheet, there are some ideas on some common trigger experiences as well. So for example, if being home alone triggers you to emotionally eat, perhaps you can find company elsewhere, over the phone, on social media, or visit a friend if you can. That would be better. Or if you've had a hard day at work and this triggers you to emotionally eat, take 5 minutes for yourself. Do something for yourself that fills your emotional cup. Have a cup of tea or coffee, or take a shower. Take a few deep breaths. Just slow down a moment. Let me also mention that food to soothe our emotions is likely to feel so much better than the alternatives suggested here. But remember that while they feel better, in the short term, they don't necessarily serve us in the long term to the bigger goal, to the thing that's actually more important to us. Human nature, we just think short term. But when we actually think logically, and if you've done the worksheet in week 1, it's like, why are you even here watching this? What is the real goal about why, you want to lose weight, but what's the reason you want to get to that goal weight? What will it enable you to do? How will it make you feel? How will your life be different? That is actually what's important to you. That's why you're here. Keep that and try to remember that. Because your food to fill out this emotional need, or fill that emotional cup, it does it really well in the short term, but it's really awful in the long term. It doesn't serve us. It's not in line with our long-term goal. When you consider it that way, it becomes easier to swap the food for something else. So it's not easy, and expect it to not be easy. This kind of discomfort, it's normal. It's hard, but it's normal. But it gets easier with time as you begin to unlink emotions with food and link emotions with alternative actions instead. It's all about shifting the habit slowly. So I want you to fill out the rest of that worksheet now. So the 5-step formula to beat emotional eating, it's identify the reasons for your emotional eating, then identify your food triggers. Don't keep food triggers in your home, or tweak your environment so that you're not coming across them. Find alternatives to emotional eating, and eat your trigger foods in public. That one's very important. In a social setting with other people. Now, we're all human, so there's going to be setbacks. It's not if, but when. It's fine. Accept it's been done. Practice self-compassion, right? The platinum rule. If you haven't watched that lesson, you need to go back and watch that again. Check in with yourself. It's okay. Learn from your experience and share it with us. Tell me. Share it in the group. When you talk about a negative experience or a bad feeling, it disarms the effect that has on you, the negative effect that it can have on you. It disarms that. It brings the power back to you. Remember how far you've come as well. It's so easy to get caught in just what just happened, but think about how far you've already come. Dust yourself off. Try again. That's how you respond to setbacks. Remember, you've only failed when you decide to quit. That's when you failed. But otherwise, it's just a setback, and it's part of the journey. And you get up and you go again, and you practice again. Okay, so to recap this lesson, emotional eating is when we eat in response to emotions rather than actual hunger. Right? In many ways, we've been conditioned or trained to engage in emotional eating since birth. Don't beat yourself up over it. This is our culture, okay? It just affects some people more than others. But fortunately, you can take back control and change your relationship with food. So complete the emotional eating worksheet. If emotional eating is something you identify as a problem, or you identify as an emotional eater, it is so important that you complete this worksheet. Share your results with me. Tell someone. Share it in the group. Then you're accountable. And it also removes the power that it has over you. Disarms the negative effects that it has on you. And begin to implement the 5-step formula, okay? The 5-step formula. Identify the reasons for your emotional eating. What triggers them? Then identify your food triggers, so what foods you turn to. Then don't keep those foods in your home. And find alternatives to those foods, alternatives to emotional eating. How else can you address that emotional need? There are other ways. And those foods that you do enjoy, that you do turn to, yeah, they're not forbidden. You can definitely have them. But you must have them with someone else. In public. Or it can be at your home if you're having a party or something. Just not by yourself. Because that's when it's associated with shame and guilt. And I'll leave you with this quote. Emotions are what make us human. They make us real. The word emotion stands for energy in motion. So be truthful about your emotions and use your mind and emotions in your favor, not against yourself. Okay, that's all for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.